With the OWCS regular season concluding and the fact that they announced it to us on social media, it's safe to say that we have officially entered award season. It's everyone's favorite time of the year when their favorite players get absolutely no honors whatsoever. But hey, considering how we literally hit rock bottom last year in the final year of OWL, there is a lot of room for improvement, and I'd like to think that OWCS did a pretty good job with some of the awards that they intend to let us vote on. In the inaugural season of OWCS, they will be handing out an overall MVP award for each role, and to avoid the forced BS that we saw last year where people were getting things they didn't deserve, they're also giving out an overall MVP for each region of the big three. I'd say this is a pretty good set of awards. Now, unfortunately, that means there's no Role Stars, Rookie of the Year, or Coach of the Year this go around, but I believe the trade-off is well worth it with what they're doing here, and I'm excited to give you my opinion on who I think should win each award. I'll also be giving out some other made-up ones, because you know me, I like to be a little bit extra, and I like to give other people some credit where it's due, but I largely want to make this video to do my grand reveal for you guys because I'm happy to say that I am an official voter for the OWCS Awards this year. I fall under the endemic OWCS focused content creator role, so my vote technically has a bit more weight to it, which is really cool, and I'm very thankful for this opportunity. Oh, and a major shout out goes to ObsSojourn. Absolutely check out her channel. I will leave a link in the description. She's been putting in God's work this season for the OWCS esports scene, uploading so many POVs, like hundreds and hundreds of all different types of teams and players. This video would not have been possible without her, so major shout out. I'll try my best to explain things. I'm not going to go too crazy because most people are going to hate my opinions anyways, so let's just dive straight into this thing, starting off with the regional MVPs. So for North America, I believe it is probably the easiest of the three. I'm going with Sugar Free. Obviously, it had to be somebody from Toronto. I mean, they won 4 stages in a row. But in my honest opinion, Sugar Free was the strongest overall player. He had the highest impact out of anybody on that Toronto team. I felt his presence the most, especially in those critical games. Not that they played that many, but when it actually came down to it, when things felt a little sweaty, they could usually count on him. To look so great, even when playing on a team of stars like this, is a testament to how great of a season he truly had. And he's very easily one of the best players in the entire world, a top tier flex DPS outside of some of the Korean powerhouses, no doubt about it. Absolutely deserves this award. I couldn't think of anybody better. Now in EMEA, you can go a couple of different ways. It's got to be somebody from the big three, aka SSG, Ensor, Twisted Minds. They're the only teams to consistently be around all year. I think you could easily go with somebody like Quartz. Kevster, of course, has to be in the conversation as well, but I'm gonna go out and say that I think Sparker was the MVP of EMEA. I believe he triumphs over my other top candidates for a couple of reasons. With Quartz, I think he lacks that relevance factor of somebody like Kevster or Sparker. It's definitely not all his fault. This guy was a beast all year, but sadly, Twisted Minds were a mess for like a couple of stages. They just weren't relevant in the slightest, so his performances felt rather meaningless, outside of the ones in Stage 1 and what we saw at the end of Stage 4. Now, with somebody like Kevster, the gap is definitely closed as ends were in every single final this year, and he had a great year overall, I should expect from one of the best DPS players that this game has to offer, but sometimes I felt like there were some minor inconsistencies that dragged him down a little bit. You think about that end of the Twisted Mind series, obviously not of his fault because of the whole coaching situation, but UB actually outplayed him in that final map on Tracer. He was the one that came up clutch. There's the fact that his Mei wasn't always the greatest, or how he didn't end up playing as well as somebody as Psycho, let's say, in the Stage 2 finals. And unfortunately, with the standards we have for Kevster these days, that's a little tough to see. You'd hope that he'd always dominate this region with an iron fist, but it just didn't happen. Somebody like Sparker, on the other hand, I always felt like he was part of the solution rather than the problem. He was such a dominant hit scan. I preferred him even over the likes of Quartz. We'd see him get the better of him in that matchup sometimes. But anytime SSG were down in the dirt, I felt like he would lift them right back out with some unbelievable performances on the Ashe and the Cassidy in particular. In both tournament runs, ice in his freaking veins. Crazy clutch gene. I mean, amongst some of the best in the entire world, let alone this region. When Sparker was on, it felt like nobody stood a chance. This guy was taking over lobbies in ways that I'd never seen him do before, and that's despite him having some pretty damn good years on the London Spitfire coming into this year. To me, he seemed like the ultimate bailout whenever SSG were facing problems in these runs. Think about the Ashe and how it made such a big difference against the Sigma and the Ramatra comms, or the random flanks he would go on as Cassidy to give his team the advantage. He was just an S+ playmaker this year, and in my opinion, he was the best player overall by a slight margin in EMEA. And then there's Asia. Well, in actuality, Korea, because they don't have any other players on the ballot except from top Korean teams, but I digress. Genuinely, there's a lot of good options from the top dogs. I went back and forth for a long time, but I felt like it had to go to somebody from Crazy Raccoon just because of how good they were throughout the entirety of this year. I know there were some downs at the end, but when you look at this year as a whole, they only lost like 4 games, so how could you not give it to one of their players? I thought about Junbin and Lip, and I mean even Shu you have to throw in there as well, all great players, but I'm gonna give it to the young buck Heesang. Maybe it's kind of boring to give MVP for all 3 regions to a DPS, but man, Heesang was an absolute beast this year from start to finish. I always felt like he was showing up. Win or loss, this guy made plays. I mean, it always felt like he was a top player on whatever hero he was being asked to play. Pharah, Echo, Tracer, Genji, even picking up Venture. It did not matter. It's as if last year in Overwatch League was nothing but a bad dream. He went right back to where he left off on O2 Blast. If anything, he reached a new peak. He went way past his limits with some of the performances he put on display for all of us to see, even outdueling some of the greatest players of all time. He was a pivotal performer in all of the Korea matches, pivotal performer at Dallas, played great in the second half of the season as well. I felt overall he had the most complete year of anybody else in this region. I thought it was really impressive that he went into this team who had a lot of veterans who had such high expectations and didn't even blink an eye. He was one of the guys with one of the biggest question marks. Could he be a consistent contributor with some of these powerhouses? Could he make his name relevant at times? And he passed with flying colors. He was one of the star playmakers, if not the star playmaker. It takes a lot of skill to have your name be said over somebody like Lip on a consistent basis. He was part of a 1-2 punch. He wasn't some kind of weakness that could be exposed, and that is absolutely insane, just knowing how loaded this team is. I have nothing but respect for how Heesang played this year. You could give it to a lot of guys on Crazy Raccoon, but I felt that Heesang just did enough to get the edge. That does it for my regional MVPs. Now time for my overall MVP of all 5 roles. So I already talked about Heesang and how he's my Asia MVP, so it goes without saying that he's also going to be my Flex DPS MVP. You could very easily argue Proper, especially with how he played at the end of this year, but when I think about this year in its totality and everything, Heesang's just a bit above him. And spoiler alert, for the rest of these roles, there's a lot more Crazy Raccoon glazing to come, so shield your ears now if you're a Crazy Raccoon hater. At Hitscan, we undoubtedly have to go with Lip as the overall MVP. Another guy that was so cold-blooded, ice in his veins whenever it mattered, so many ridiculous pop-offs across the Tracer, and Ashe, Cassidy, Widow, just a guy that seems to be withstanding father time with how he can maintain this high level of play. This might be the biggest blowout out of any of the positions. I mean, you can't really say Proper Stalker because they kind of split that hit scan and sometimes they're playing Flex instead. Flora's way too inconsistent. I don't think you could take Sparker or Quartz over him. Merit's cool and all, but he was a little too up and down for my liking. Lip just takes this one. He clears, man. On support, for Flex and main, we're going with Shu and Chorong. They were just an incredible duo. I don't think you can separate these two. I don't think you can give more credit to one guy than the other. They were both excellent this year. You look at Chu, I mean, it's a little beyond OWCS, but in Esports World Cup, he was literally the MVP in that finals, and we saw a lot of the same performances, especially in the first half of this year, and up until this Juno meta, I thought he was absolutely insane. And if you factor in that Juno stuff, maybe it kind of helped somebody like Fielder close the gap a little bit, but it felt like most of the time she was completely and utterly diffing this man, and there's no other flex support that can even compare to those two, so Shu's gotta take it there. Main support, I feel, is a bit more up in the air because I thought Violet, despite all of the memes, had a pretty good year. Chio wasn't bad at all either, but I mean, think about it like this, man. The inconsistencies they had compared to Chorong feel pretty significant. There were times where even Chio, I was questioning what he'd be doing out there. Obviously, you'd expect it with Violet. He's just a meme at this point. He's still good, yes, but those boneheaded plays just happen more and more often, and he played a lot of Alarian stuff as well, so it almost felt like he was still trying to embrace the flex support role, while Chorong just went out there and was mostly consistent, even looking good on Brig and Juno to a certain extent. I have no complaints to be had about this guy. It was a good year overall. It wasn't anything out of this world. It wasn't like prime Chio last year, in my opinion, but I felt like he was in the headlines for all of the right reasons instead of the wrong ones, and that's honestly the most important thing to do as a support player, especially on main, so I'll give it to him. And of course on tank MVP, we've got to complete the crazy raccoon, I guess 5 fecta if you want to call it that, with Junbin. At first I was a little worried that him and Max would split too much, so it'd be too difficult to say either one of them can be MVP, but over time Junbin hogged all of the spotlight and just played unreal this entire year. He cleared every other tank, even someone in my eyes. Just an absolute monster on the field. In a similar light to Hisang, it's like the shock thing was a bad nightmare. This dude unleashed his true potential in the right environment. I don't think any other tank did as good of a job as him as not only solo carrying, but also setting his team up for success. He was just such an easy player to build your team around and focus your game plan around because you could always depend on him. He certainly one-ups a lot of the other big-name tanks. This guy had some amazing moments on countless tanks. In a Winston-centric region like Korea, absolutely insane stuff there, but then he took it a step or two further. Decent Mauga, decent Orisa, but then how many teams out there do you know, maybe outside of Poker Face, that could be so dominant and controlling of a game on Wrecking Ball here in the modern day? That Ilios ruins Wrecking Ball strat? Forget about it. You are screwed. I've never seen a Wrecking Ball demand so much attention. The setup was beautiful on that hero always. There was the crazy juggles on the Winston, and even friggin' throwing out Roadhog in a grand finals and making it work the way he did. Junbin was built different on tank this year, and I can't think of anybody more deserving than him to be the MVP of his role. And those are the main awards, the official ones that OWCS is giving out this year. That's my opinion on all of them. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. But now we're going to expand things quickly, just for funsies, with some made-up awards, because I like to give some love to the other regions. I think it's a little unfair to give out overall MVPs for each position, because you just know they're going to go to Korea. It's not exactly fair. So I'm quickly going to run through my regional position MVPs for EMEA and NA real quick for you guys. In EMEA, at tank, I think as crazy as it may sound, I'm going with KSA. I know that he missed all of Stage 3 and technically a good bit of the Stage 2 playoffs as well, but whenever he played, it was just so obvious he was the best tank out there. I can't ignore something like that, you know? Whenever he took the field of battle, it was just curtains for whoever he was playing against. He won a title with 2 freaking teams while being a contributor for both of them, man. I don't know what else to tell you. Crazy Ram, Crazy Mauga, Crazy Diva, not a lot of cracks in his gameplay. For my DPS hit scan, obviously I'm going with Sparker. He was my overall EMEA regional MVP, so it makes sense to put him in there as well. Although again, honorable mention to Quartz, crazy year from him as well. At Flex DPS, this is where we can give enough credit to Kevster to slide him into an award. While he didn't do quite enough for me personally to be the overall MVP, clearly he still was the best at his particular position, and it wasn't all that close if you look at it across an entire region. He was somebody that could always be played, somebody that always showed up, and went to literally every single stage final. He's still one of the gods of the game, and that's all there really is to it. Not too many big concerns. It's harder to be picky with an award like this compared to overall MVP. Nothing but love for Kevster, despite of what I might have said earlier. Crazy year from him, as always. Very deserved. Then for flex and main support, honestly, it's kind of crazy to go with all SSG players, but at the end of the day, man, how can you go against them? How could you go against Landon and Funny Astro? What was their competition? I mean, this might be the easiest thing to vote for of all. Think about all the other top teams. Twisted Minds, Ends, they basically had a revolving door with their supports. It was different every single stage. People like Kanale and Gala, they were good, but I mean, Astro and Landon are clearly a step above. Great Kiri and BAP performances. Landon could even play a mean Brig, as we saw. Funny Astro, of course, was always clutch in the finals on Lucio, as you'd expect from the guy, but even shown us he can play a mean Juno in Stage 4, looking like one of the better players in the world on her. This is just as easy as it gets. This was the most consistent backline by a country mile. And then finally, North America. I mean, we just know it's Toronto Defiant. There's no other way to describe it. It's just all of their players straight up. Someone puts every other tank in NA to shame. Sugar Free was an absolute god amongst men, plus he was my NA MVP. Merit, I mean, you could maybe make an argument for Seeker, hell, even like Tree or PGE if you wanted to, because he was a bit up and down, but he did have a lot of good performances overall, and you can't argue with the results, so I'd say he wins Hitscan. And then RuPaul and Vega, I mean, just the best overall at their positions. I know Vega, people laugh at him for some of the bad mistakes that he made in some matches in the clutch, but he had a lot of bright spots as well on Alari. He came into his own as this season went on. I thought he was a reliable playmaker, especially for this region for sure. So him and RuPaul take it very easily as well. I know it's kind of sad to go with just all players from one team from all of these regions, but that's just how it goes when you're the most dominant, right? And for the final set of awards I'm going to give out, I'm doing something that I've always wanted to do on the channel when making awards videos. For those of you who are familiar with the NBA, when they give out the All-NBA first, second, and third teams, I'm going to try and implement a similar thing to OWCS, almost like Roll Stars in a way. You can think of it like that, but I'm going to call it OWCS first and second team, and we'll do it for all three regions just because why not? Now just know the numbers won't always make sense. It won't consistently be an even or odd number of players per all OWCS team. It really depends on the demand and how good a certain player was and how flexible they are. In a lot of senses, I want it to be two different specialties. A hit scan and a flex DPS, a flex support and a main support, and if necessary, maybe like a main tankish type of guy, and then a flex tankish type of guy, or off tank, I should say. It'll make more sense as I go on here. So let's start with the All Korea first team. On tank, we're going with Junbin and Bernard. DPS will be Heesang and Lip, and then Shu Chorong will close out support. Now, all the crazy raccoon guys I mentioned, I already said that I think they were their positional MVPs, so no need to explain it any further than that. But I'm also adding in Bernard because it pisses me off that he's already starting to fall out of relevance, despite him putting up a top 2, top 3 tank season, in my opinion. He was great through and through. He could keep up with the likes of Junbin and Hanbin. He was never a reason why this Zeta Division team struggled. Whenever they imploded at the most weird moments possible, he was trying his best just to keep them afloat. He was a great diva. He could play Mauga. He could play the Orisa. He was an awesome Doomfist player as well. This version of Bernard was one I'd literally never seen before. He was incredible, and I think if he was on one of these top teams, he could have made an even bigger impact, and just considering that Junbin more so focused on like the main tankish heroes, I'd like to throw in a top off-tank like guy as well, so I'm putting Bernard in there. For All Korea second team, I'm going with most of the Falcons core, minus Smurf, of course, because he didn't play too great. And in return, we're going to throw in Donghak, so we have a main tank, off tank, 1-2 punch here. Just to run it down quickly with the Falcons squad, I mean, Hanbin maybe is a little controversial, didn't play as great as in other seasons, but I thought he picked it up especially as he got more play time this year, and he played less of Winston and things calmed down. Looked good on the things that the team asked him to play, and was dominant on the things we've seen him be good on in the past. Enough said there. For the other 4 Falcons players, pretty self-explanatory stuff here. Proper and Stalker were a great duo all season long. They constantly switched who was doing what, and they both found success regardless of that at certain points throughout this year, both on hitscan and flex DPS. You love to see it. Stalker did a lot of the heavy lifting. First half of the year on the Tracer, second half we'd see Proper pick it up, playing an unreal Genji in the last month or so. And Fielder Chio, I mean, they've been doing it for a long time, right? They're just an excellent 1-2 punch. Great balance of teamwork here, where Fielder brings a lot of intangibles. He's very calculated with some of his plays. He's really picked it up on Brig as of late. Good season overall, even if a lot of the time he was getting outplayed by Shu, while Chio brings a lot of that playmaking that most main supports just never can. It may be a little bit of a hot take to include Donghak, whose team never was all that relevant, especially in the second half of this year, but I thought through and through, beat on Fnatic or when they were Yeti, that Donghak always held his own and was a pretty significant playmaker, one of the more noticeable tanks out there. In a world that seems to be ever so dominated by DPS, I could always feel his presence out there. His Doomfist and his Winston still looked as great as ever, and they made it so that Yeti / Fnatic had their own unique characteristics, their own unique playstyle that sometimes won them some big games, and I often felt like he was behind it with some of the ridiculous carries that he was putting on, so let's throw him some flowers. This was definitely a redemption arc compared to his rookie year where he received a lot of criticism. As we get into EMEA, this is where things get messy with the ratios, as I'm starting off on EMEA first team with only one tank, that being KSA. Maybe you want to count the whole stage 3 thing against him, but I won't. I thought he was the best tank overall. But in place of another tank, I'm throwing Quartz in there alongside Kevster and Sparker. Even though I don't think he was good enough to be MVP, he definitely is still in the same realm as Sparker and Kevster, very easily one of the best players in EU by far, and leaving him off of first team would be a literal crime, with some of the performances he put up on Widow in stage 4, and then what he did in stage 1 to help his team win at their peak when Twisted Minds were still really good. I mean, come on, man. Quartz is a beast. Everything else, though, pretty self-explanatory. All those guys were essentially just role MVPs. For All-EMEA second team, things are going to be a bit weirder because there's some guys that I felt I just could not leave off of this list. At tank, we're going with Vestola, Hadi, two of the best 3 tanks in EU, no doubt about it. Hadi showed great strides on Ramatra and looked good on the Orisa as well, and a key leader as usual for SSG, while Vestola was very well-rounded for ENCE. He was a good contributor in all 4 stages and was arguably the best Diva and Sigma player, and some people may even say Vestola was the best tank player overall in this region. On DPS, I didn't want to leave off one of these 3 guys of Shockwave, Sauna, and Psycho. They all had such great moments either in like the first or second half of the year. None of them were great throughout the entire thing, so I figured why not throw all of them in there. And then with the backline, it's rough because again, Twisted Minds and ENCE are just like, we're going to do the shuffle with this position. So I figured why not go with the staple bunch of Canale and Gala, I guess. I mean, maybe you want to put in like Bliss or MCD, even, I don't know, Calyx, but there was just so much inconsistencies there, and they weren't always all that relevant. You could usually count on Canale and Gala to not be top tier, but just below it, so I feel pretty good about sneaking them in here. And then for the North Americans, NA first team, just Toronto Defiant, period. No explanation needed there. For all NA second team, though, I'm going with Infected on tank. DPS will be PGE, Tree, and Seeker. And for the backline, I'll throw in Rack Attack and Ultraviolet. All guys that maybe go a little underappreciated in a region that's just dominated by one team, but I liked what I saw from all of these guys. Infected was a very promising tank prospect coming into this year, and he lived up to the hype, and if there was a Rookie of the Year, you'd probably give it to him for actually participating in like a S-tier event like this. Really good stuff. Clearly the second best tank in the entire region. Like, maybe you could throw Callan in there as well, but Infected was extremely consistent and versatile as well. Now, some people may be laughing because I threw PGE in on DPS. I mean, I think Tree and Seeker make a lot of sense for how they performed, but I thought PGE had some unreal peaks in NA. And if you're looking outside of the top finisher, They were absolutely some of the best with the Widow and Sojourn plays. He wasn't always consistent, he had his ups and downs, but he was a big-time splash playmaker for NRG Shock through and through. Every single stage he had some great highlight-worthy plays, and I thought I'd include him for being one of the best hit scans in the region. Supports is where things kind of get a bit thin. I don't think you could pick anybody outside of NRG. Maybe you throw Callan, but I mostly thought he was just good on Alari. Rack Attack, I mean, probably second best main support overall, and he deserves to get some kind of credit after what he went through last year. Call it pity if you want, but he played well enough for sure. In Ultraviolet, I thought whether it was M80 or NRG was always serviceable on a variety of flex supports, so definitely going to give him the nod there, and that basically wraps up all of my awards. I'm done yapping. That's who I have for all of the main ones as well as the made up ones. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below, and let me know who you think should be winning the awards as well. I'd love to hear your opinions and how they differ from mine. And of course, if you enjoyed this video and you want more OWCS content just like this, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you're new, and follow me on all of my other socials. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.